Hello, Steel Plaza Podcast. This is Chief Philosophical Officer Andy Hoke coming at you with another intriguing installment of Andy's Philosophy Corner. All right. Happy 2021, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the new year so far. I know many of us were sick of 2020, so everyone who is sick of 2020, congratulations, you got your wish. So we sort of took January off, and so this will hopefully premiere the first week of February 2021. In the United States of America, from where this podcast originates, February is Black History Month, and so being a philosophy broadcast, I thought it would be terrific to do our best to honor a great African-American, Martin Luther King. In particular, I aim to focus on what he had to say about nonviolence. What he had to say about nonviolence and about love. Just a very brief biography, which I ripped off of the internet. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born January 15th, 1929, and he tragically was assassinated April 4th, 1968. He was an American Baptist minister, doctor, civil rights activist, and recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. He was the husband of Coretta Scott King and the father of Yolanda King and Martin Luther King III. And with no further ado, actually, with just a little further ado, after bringing to you a lot of these quotes, I thought I would back that up with a lot of quotes from someone who informed Martin Luther King quite a bit on nonviolence, that being none other than Mahatma Gandhi. So we're going to start by bringing you a lot of Martin Luther King quotes, and then we'll bring you some Gandhi quotes. And in between, because it's my podcast and I can do what I want, in between, I'm just going to share with you my experience and thoughts over having recently seen the classic piece of American film known as Moby Dick. So, that's just kind of a halftime show. Let's call it that. So, now with no further ado, here is a collection of quotes I found from Martin Luther King Jr. Quote, "True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." In the 50s, in a response to an accusation that he was disturbing the peace by his activism during the Montgomery bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama, as quoted in Let the Trumpet Sound, A Life of Martin Luther King Jr., 1982 by Stephen Gates. Although the Montgomery Council never had a large membership, it played an important role. As the only truly interracial group in Montgomery, it served to keep the desperately needed channels of communication open between the races. Men often hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they cannot communicate. They cannot communicate because they are separated. In providing an avenue of communication, the council was fulfilling a necessary condition for better race relations in the South. In reference to the Alabama Council on Human Relations, an organization which was joined by King, whose church's meeting room was used to hold monthly meetings for the Montgomery chapter of the council, Stride Toward Freedom, The Montgomery Story, 1958. Quote, "Man is man because he is free to operate within the framework of his destiny. He is free to deliberate, to make decisions, and to choose between alternatives. He is distinguished from animals by his freedom to do evil or to do good, and to walk the high road of beauty or tread the low road of ugly degeneracy." End quote. That comes from The Measures of Man, 1959. Tolstoy, the Russian writer, said in War and Peace, quote, "I cannot conceive of a man not being free unless he is dead." End quote. While this statement sounds a bit exaggerated, it gets at a basic truth. What Tolstoy is saying in substance is that the absence of freedom is the presence of death. Any nation or government that deprives an individual of freedom is in that moment committing an act of moral and spiritual murder. Any individual who is not concerned about his freedom commits an act of moral and spiritual suicide. Let me repeat that. Any individual who is not concerned about his freedom commits an act of moral and spiritual suicide, end quote. This is from Martin Luther King Jr.'s address at the 50th Annual NAACP Convention, July 17th, 1959. King also said, "You cannot solve the problem by turning to communism. For communism is based on an ethical relativism and a metaphysical materialism that no Christian can accept." And King makes two biblical allusions to Luke 15, chapter 17, and Timothy 6, chapter 6, part 10. "For the love of money is the root of all evil." This is, stepping away from the quotes, this is very, very widely misquoted. Money is not the root of evil. It is the love of money. And I think it's an important distinction. We try to be precise with our quotes and our references, our citations and our sources. So, King goes on to say, quote, "We must follow nonviolence and love." I'm talking about the love of God in the hearts of men. I'm talking about a type of love which will cause you to love the person who does the evil deed while hating the deed that person does. We've got to love. Each of us must keep faith in the future. Let us not despair. Let us realize that as we struggle for justice and freedom, we have cosmic companionship. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? End quote. This is from Loving Your Enemies, published November 1957. An address delivered at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Quote, "Far from being the pious injunction of a utopian dreamer, this command is an absolute necessity for the survival of our civilization. Yes, it is love that will save our world and our civilization. Love even for our enemies." How do you go about loving your enemies? I think the first thing is this. In order to love your enemies, you must begin by analyzing self. And I'm sure that seems strange to you that I start out telling you this morning that you love your enemies by beginning with a look at self. It seems to me that this is the first and foremost way to come to an adequate discovery to the how of the situation. He also mentioned some people aren't going to like you. He goes on to say, a second thing that an individual must do in seeking to love his enemy is to discover the element of good in his enemy. And every time you begin to hate that person and think of hating that person, realize that there is some good there and look at those good points, which will overbalance the bad points. Another way that you love your enemy is this. When the opportunity presents itself for you to defeat the enemy, that is the time which you must not do it. That is the meaning of love. In the final analysis, love is not this sentimental something that we talk about. It's not merely an emotional something. Love is creative, understanding goodwill for all men. It is the refusal to defeat any individual. When you rise to the level of love, of its great beauty and power, you seek only to defeat evil systems. Individuals who happen to be caught up in that system you love, but you seek to defeat the system. So lots of good stuff there. And I've got more. The Greek language comes out with another word for love. It is the word agape. Agape is something of the understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. It is a love that seeks nothing in return. It is an overflowing love. It's what theologians would call the love of God working in the lives of men. And when you rise to love on this level, you begin to love men, not because they are likable, but because God loves them. You look at every man and you love him because you know God loves him. And he might be the worst person you've ever seen. And this is what Jesus means, I think, in this very passage when he says, love your enemy. And it's significant that he does not say, like your enemy. Like is a sentimental something, an affectionate something. There are a lot of people that I find it difficult to like. I don't like what they do to me. I don't like what they say about me and other people. I don't like their attitudes. I don't like some of the things they're doing. I don't like them. But Jesus says, love them. And love is greater than like. Love is understanding, redemptive goodwill for all men, so that you love everybody because God loves them. You refuse to do anything that will defeat an individual because you have agape in your soul. And here you come to the point that you love the individual who does the evil deed while hating the deed that the person does. This is what Jesus means when he says, love your enemy. This is the way to do it. When the opportunity presents itself, when you can defeat your enemy, you must not do it. Somewhere, here's another quote. This isn't sourced.